Here's a video breaking down my home recording setup for my drums in the spare room of my house. I need to go over a disclaimer first before we get stuck into the meat and veg of this video. This is a very home job DIY drum recording setup on a budget. This video is mainly intended for other drummers looking to get started with their own recordings at home. I am not an audio engineer, just some dude who plays drums in his bedroom and records it with some dodgy microphones and then fiddles around with some EQ and compression until it sounds how I like it. So if you are a studio engineer, then this video may trigger you because I break a lot of rules and I make a lot of stuff up as I go. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I'm very much embracing the home job DIY essence here with this setup, so just keep that in mind. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to give you guys a rundown on the gear I have first, starting with the drum kit. The kit I use for recording is a Sonor AQ1. They're a German company and one of the oldest manufacturers of percussion instruments in the world. This is one of their entry-level kits. I got it because I wanted another kit to leave set up at home for practicing and recording, and it was great value for money. It comes with all the hardware, and I love the Birch shells. They sound really punchy and nice. I've kept the stock heads on them for now. I was originally planning to replace them as soon as I got the kit, but I thought I'd just see how they perform first. So far, they've held up pretty well. They're the Remo UT series of heads, which is what Remo puts on the kits that come out of the factories in China. The toms have the UT equivalent of the pinstripes, and the snare looks to be the same as a coded Emperor. I'm looking forward to putting fresh heads on eventually and feeling like I'm playing a brand new kit again. I'm using the Birch snare drum that came with the kit, and it's honestly pretty solid. It's not oozing with character, but it's versatile enough for what I'm doing with it. I use a whole range of drum brands. I find it hard to be loyal to just one brand because I honestly love them all. I use this old Tama Powerglide pedal, which must be like 20 years old. I've been using it for ages and it's solid as a rock. Got to do a quick shout out to my Pearl Rhodes the Drum Throne. This thing is comfy as. Now for the cymbals. I use Meinl all round. I love these things. German company as well. Made in Turkey. Cost me an arm and a leg, but they have such an awesome and unique sound. They're very much a part of my drumming identity these days. I got them because they're very dark and smooth sounding, and a lot quieter than most other traditional cymbals. I have the 14-inch Serpent hats. These are pretty cool because you can switch them over and either use the brighter cymbal on top or the darker, drier cymbal. I personally keep it on the dry side. And see that little hi-hat clutch there? That is it's a Pearl quick release clutch. It's honestly one of the best bits of drum gear I own. I love that thing. Here's a 17-inch extra thin dry crash. They weren't kidding with the name. This is the thinnest cymbal I've ever seen. It sounds pretty crazy as well, almost like a splash or a small china. The crash sound doesn't stick around for a while, which is what I like about it. Here's a 20-inch Big Apple ride. I mainly use this thing as a crash ride because it's got this great smooth crash sound without completely taking over the rest of the mix. Next up is a 21-inch transition ride. Not much to say about this guy, just sounds fairly normal, but also fits in with the overall dry Meinl family sound I have going on here. Now onto microphones. I have a real ragtag setup of different microphones that I've borrowed or bought for real cheap off my mates. The bass drum microphone is the first proper mic I've bought. It's a Beyerdynamic TG D71 half cardioid thingy that I put in the inside of the bass drum on a pillow, usually pretty far back from the beater so I can get a full drum sound. On the snare we have the classic SM57 that I'm currently borrowing from a mate. Can't go wrong with one of these. On the toms we have the old dodgy Samsons. I don't know much about these, but they're not terrible. I also have a spare one of these mics that I move around the place depending on what I'm doing. Sometimes I put it outside the bass drum, but that usually sounds pretty weird. Otherwise I'll put it on the third tom if I use it, or else it goes on the bottom of the snare. The cymbals / overhead / room microphone, I use this one AKG pencil condenser. It's a C451B. Having one microphone to pick up all the cymbals is probably the one thing holding me back the most with this current setup. It's proven to be quite challenging getting an even mix out of this thing, and I'm always moving it around to try and find the best spot for it in the room. Another overhead microphone is definitely near the top of the list for things to get to improve my setup. I run all of the microphones through the Scarlett 3rd generation 18i20 interface. This thing has 8 preamps in it, which I use at least 6 of here with the drums. This thing is great, really easy to use, got cool lights, looks badass. I have very generous and supportive friends who bought this for me, which basically got me off the ground with this whole bedroom recording thing, so it's all thanks to them. For in-ear monitoring, I use these MEE M6 Pros, and they're not amazing, but they were pretty cheap and they do the job. They isolate enough sound for me to hear the click tracks and backing tracks over my drumming. I'm not going to show you them because I'm nervous they're covered in earwax. Here's a bit of a POV when I record from my seat behind the drums. I use my snare as a mouse pad while I'm setting up the session, and I have my keyboard right there on top of the interface, and I can control the volume of the mix and the in-ears, which I plug in here. I got my monitor right up there so I can see what I'm doing and how I'm tracking. I usually put the camera on some boxes here and point it at the drums. Once I'm done with tracking the drums, it's onto the mixing. For mixing monitors, I use the Adam Audio T5Vs, another German company, and at this point I'm thinking I should just move to Germany because it's getting ridiculous. They just make such good music gear and I love it all. And for the software, I use Reaper. This software is an absolute beast and can do anything you can make it do, and it's free. So yeah, no brainer. Except it does actually take a bit of brain to use and get set up properly, so maybe it's more of a slight brainer. But once you get this thing set up how you like, man, she's just lovely. And I've got mine looking just like Pro Tools because it makes me feel like I know what I'm doing. For this example, I'm going to be using my cover of Run by Shihad. This song is epic, this band is great, Tom Larkin is a great drummer, and this song rules. It's got the big tom parts, the big smashy cymbal parts, the groovy verse parts. This will be a good song to use for this demonstration. The first thing I like to do when I start the mixing process is to normalize all the levels. I get the basic levels and then I have a listen to what I'm working with. So as you can see, it's a fairly decent bedroom recording. Not bad for 6 dodgy microphones. Plenty to work with here, in my book. The next thing I like to do is clean up all the tom tracks. I do this by cutting out all the parts where I'm not playing the toms. I go through and cut just before each transient and then a little bit after the last transient in each section. It can take a while depending on the song. Now that that part is done, I go through and get each track sounding sweet. Usually start at the top and work my way down. As you can see, I'm mainly using 3 things on each track: a noise gate, EQ, and compression. So we'll start with the kick track first. I use the gate to clean it up, so we're only hearing the bass drum here. Then I pick all my favorite frequencies, boost them up, basically pull down anything else that I don't want. I'm going for a big, punchy rock kick sound here. So the bass drum will need to be quite aggressive because I want to smack people in the face with it. Compression really helps here with making it slap real hard. Next is the snare. Same thing with the noise gate, except not as aggressive this time because I want to keep it open for some of those nifty little ghost notes I do. EQ and compression again. I keep it pretty safe with the snare sound in this song. Tom tracks are cleaned up, so I mainly use the gates to control the tails on them. For EQ, I just pick the bass tone frequency and give that a bit of a boost. And then I take the plastic slappy frequencies up the other end and give them a bit of a boost as well. I drop out the stuff in the middle a bit because we don't really need it. The overhead microphone gets a big EQ boost up the top end, and then I get rid of everything else. These cymbals are very dry and dark, so I tend to brighten them up a bit in the mix here. Then I run all the drums through a drum bus track, and this is where we really kick things up a notch. I use this compressor plugin and dial it all the way up to 100. This does a lot of the heavy lifting, and I'm almost certain I'm abusing this and breaking heaps of rules here, but I think it sounds badass and it glues everything together. I have this Reverb Bus set up. Applying reverb to mixes is definitely a weak point of mine. I always struggle with it, so I usually use a preset and then fiddle around with it a little bit, but mostly I keep the mix pretty dry. There's a little trick I do to the backing track to make my drums fit in with it better. I use the EQ to snip some frequencies out of each end. You'll be surprised how much of this you can get away with without it sounding too distracting. This lets my recorded drums sit on top of the original song better and fill in those missing frequencies without the original drums sounding too messy underneath. I slap a limiter on the master track because I don't want to take responsibility for mastering this thing properly. All that's left to do now is export the final mix. I use Davinci Resolve to sync the footage from my camera with my recorded drum mix. It's another great free bit of software. This is the most satisfying part because it's quite simple and I get to see the finished product. I simply import the footage from my camera and import my drum mix into the project. I then go through the footage and place a marker on the very first hit of the song. In this case, it's the big two-handed cymbal smash. And then I do the same with the drum mix audio file. And then I line up the two markers. Easy. I then export the video and upload it to the internet and get a bazillion views and then make $1 million, and then Minel and Sonor give me free stuff and I live happily ever after in my fantasy drumming world. Anyways, I hope this was helpful or at least interesting for you. Thanks for watching. See ya!